all women, at least at some point in their lifetime. And this is probably a really conservative estimate because it's not routinely diagnosed. Okay, let's get started. One of the most common questions I get asked from both clients and potential clients is, so in actual fact, the question is, what causes Hashimoto's? Okay, now most functional medicine health practitioners believe that there are three conditions or three root causes that must be met before Hashimoto's is actually developed. Okay, the very first one is having a genetic predisposition for it. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means that you could have a family history of it, but it's important to note that just having the genetic material does not mean that you are going to develop it. Now, let's go back a step. Having a genetic predisposition does not necessarily, in fact, very rarely would it mean that you have a gene that says your thyroid's going to malfunction. No, it's a lot more nuanced, a lot subtler than that. It can mean that somewhere in your genetic background says that some pathway is not functioning properly, or your ability to absorb a certain nutrient isn't as it should be. Okay, does this mean that this is going to be expressed physically? No, not necessarily. So I want to make sure they understand the difference between having the genetic background and whether it's going to be expressed physically in the functioning of your body. And there can be two separate situations. Now, up until probably about 20 or 30 years ago, we thought that our DNA or our genetics was our destiny. Well, we now know through a field called Epigenetics that our DNA has got a number of tags or markers on it that act as a little on and off switch. Now, I know I'm really simplifying this here. And there are a number of things that can turn those switches on and off. So you might have a switch turned on that will promote good, healthy functioning. Or you can have another one that if it's turned on means that you're more likely to develop some type of chronic disease. Okay, so the good news is that there are ways of affecting how it's expressed physically. So what are some of the things that can affect it? Well, the type of food that you eat, okay, is one. There are many, many others. So eating a certain type of food can turn on a marker or a tag that will promote some aspect of good health. But the important thing is that, as I mentioned before, your genetics aren't your destiny. You can make changes, and that will affect your health in the long run, regardless of your family history. Okay, now the second, what I was going to add as well is that if you're interested in finding out more information about epigenetics, what I'll do is I'll put a couple of references in the comments below. Okay, now back to number 2. The second root cause is increased gut lining permeability. Okay, what does that mean? It's quite a mouthful. Well, sometimes it's very incorrectly referred to as leaky gut. So let's think of what the role of the gut lining is. So its sole purpose basically is to allow the things that our body needs to function. So this is nutrients, food particles like small molecules, to let that in through so it goes into the bloodstream and is distributed to all of our cells. But it's also designed to keep out a bunch of the things that can harm us. So those are things like bacteria, viruses, toxins, maldigested food particles. Okay, so it's designed to keep those out. So the gut lining is dynamically permeable, so it will open up at times and close down at the others. Now, the problem is that when it has increased permeability, that it allows in some of these other unwelcome organisms or particles. So as soon as those pass through, then our immune system kicks into action as it's supposed to, and it has to decide whether this is just a strange thing, a new thing, or whether it's a danger. And if it thinks it's a danger, then it's going to mount an inflammation response and create antibodies and do a search and destroy. and that's all fine. Now the problem is, and they think this is one theory of how an autoimmune disorder starts up, is that let's say you've got a maldigested food particle, so a very large food particle actually passes through, and your immune system says, hey, wait a minute, I don't think this should be here, and it starts creating antibodies against it. So far, so good. But there's some thought that there could be certain food particles that resemble human tissue, and in particular, the thyroid gland. So next thing, the immune system has created antibodies, and it's going through the body, and all of a sudden it looks at the thyroid tissue and says, oh, wait a minute, isn't that what we're supposed to be searching and destroying? And then it starts on its mission. Okay, so that's just one of the theories. I think that an autoimmune response will start. Okay, so how does the gut lining become so damaged that it allows all of this stuff to come through? Well, there's a lot of things that can happen there. So prolonged toxins, bacteria, or a change in the makeup of the bacteria in the microbiome, viruses, food sensitivities can do it as well. So these have to be chronic. So this is over time that it's going to actually start breaking down the gut lining. And it's not the entire gut lining. It may only be in just one spot of our small intestine or our colon where this stuff can happen. Okay. Now, the good news is that can be addressed. We can repair the gut lining. First off, we've got to find out what is actually damaging it, eliminate that, and then fix the gut lining again. Okay, so that was number 2. Number 3 is environmental variables. Now, that seems really broad. It is very broad, and I'll go into a little bit of detail here. So these are things that we are allowing into our body that are going to have a problem, that are going to cause some problems or impact our body negatively. So those are things like toxins. So toxins, pesticides in our foods, toxins or chemicals that are in our personal care products, in our cleaning supply. It can be heavy metals. Particular is mercury. Now, a lot of us still have a lot of mercury amalgams in our mouth. So if those start to break down, then we are actually swallowing a fair amount of mercury right there that the body has to detox. Bacterial, change in the bacterial species, so the balance of the bacteria. What else? Infections, bacterial and viral infections. Now, probably one of the most important thing, that impacts so many of us now, is stress. Okay? Now, I won't go into a whole lot of detail right now. That's perhaps for another question and answer period about the impact of stress. But in particular, with the thyroid, is that under chronic stress conditions, so it's not just a one of our usual stress that we occasionally have to deal with. This is when we have chronic stress. More cortisol, it's another hormone, is produced in the body, and if over time what it does is it tends to shut down the conversion of T4, which is a thyroid hormone, and it's more or less a storage hormone. It shuts down the conversion to T3, which is the more active thyroid hormone. So when that shuts down, our thyroid becomes sluggish. And because the thyroid acts as kind of a thermostat or kind of the gas pedal for the rest of the body, everything's to start not working the way it's supposed to. So stress is a really big thing, especially now when there seems to be an awful lot of uncertainty and worry in the world. Okay, so those were the 3 main root causes that all 3 of them have to be in effect before you can develop Hashimoto's or any autoimmune condition. Now, you can see that there is an incredible amount of variability right there. So everyone's genetic makeup is a little bit different. Okay. How we impact our gut lining can also be quite individual, and certainly the environmental variables that impact us can be quite variable too. So what does this mean? Well, this means that there is no size fits all for fixing Hashimoto's, okay? Your Hashimoto's is different from almost everybody else's, which explains why So many clients become very frustrated because they say, well, I have a friend who's done this and it seems to be working for her, but when I tried it, it didn't work at all. Well, it's because your Hashimoto's is totally different from hers. You have a totally different mix of variables that are affecting your body. Okay? And so the method that I use to address this is to sort out each one. Let's go back to the root cause, looking at your entire health history, the things that your diet, everything that's going on in your life, and try and sort out which are the variables that are impacting you. Okay, again, your genetic predisposition, increased gut lining permeability, and all those environmental variables that can impact you. Okay, now if you are frustrated and you know that you want to make a change in your life in order to resolve some of the symptoms that you have, but you don't know what to do next, look, just get in touch with me and we'll have a quick talk and figure out what your next best steps are. In the meantime, if you've got any comments or you have some questions that you want answered, hey, just put them down in the comment section below or message me. I'm happy to get back to you. Okay, until next time. Bye for now.